Thank you. My name is François Kaitachayuk for the European Union. Okay. The problem is that if I stand up, I may fall. It's more secure to stay seated. Okay, I would like to make a comment about the integration approach. I think for nutrition, maybe it's time to look at nutrition in the context of social protection and to integrate nutrition into the social protection programs because the specific interventions usually don't resolve the problem in the long term, and people can see the improvement in the nutrition indicators for short term, and then after that it is degraded. I can give an example of a country that maybe many people don't hear about so often is North Korea, which has a large deficit of food production, especially in proteins. But they have integrated nutrition, especially for children, into the actually the schooling system, and it means that the outcome, the nutrition outcome in North Korea is much better in many African countries that have much more production, especially in proteins. So I think that if it's integrated in more social protection system, I think it can yield better results.
Thank you. My name is Lola Gostolo. I'm an independent consultant. I've been struggling to really get to the nub of what's different and where resilience takes us, where we haven't been before or improve what we've tried to do in the past. And I'm struck by the discussions today that raise a question in my mind as to whether what resilience offers is a common language that actually addresses your challenge about what nutritionists have failed to do, which is to make undernutrition of concern to everybody, and therefore to mobilize a number of sectors to deal with something that's fundamental to human development. And I wonder whether that's what's attractive and empowering, because it creates an intersectoral incentive that frankly hasn't existed, even after the 2008 Lancet, which made the economic imperative case for nutrition or tackling undernutrition. You know, that took a long time to mobilize. So I would really appreciate thoughts about whether what's different about resilience, and I'm thinking about Per Pinström Andersson's question earlier, so what? Is resilience anything different? I wonder what is different is that it is a common language, that it creates common ownership of a problem, because fundamentally, conceptually, we've got what we need. We have a really comprehensive analytical framework that's been around since 1990 that talks about the layers, it talks about the stakeholders, it talks about the intersectoral avenues of causality. But it's been our own baby, and I think that's where it's been really limiting. And I just wonder whether resilience is a pathway for nutritionists to let that baby flourish and grow in the hands of other sectors.
Thank you, Suresh Babu from IFPRI. I want to follow up on what Harold Alderman said about what are we trying to do over the past 20 years in terms of bringing people together from various sectors to make impact on the ground. One of the things that we experience at the national level when we bring people together, nutritionists, policy makers, and policy analysts, economists, is that they see problems differently and discuss and go back, and then they go back to their single discipline that they came from. And we try to find out the common language, and we have been doing that for many, many, many years. Now it is important that we learn language of each other. And one thing that I want to place in terms of discussion is that why don't we, not leaving nutrition to nutritionists, go beyond to make nutritionists more as policy analysts and public policy researchers. There are few around who have made tremendous contribution to the public policy literature as well as nutrition. And I don't see that coming in the universities and the colleges. Because of that, we keep coming back to the problem of nutritionists doing nutrition, policy analysts doing policy using nutrition variables, and then we are not going far. Why not, even in developing countries, change the curriculum for nutritionists to incorporate some economics and public policy? In the public policy, bring in some nutrition courses at the graduate level at least, so that we have strong individuals coming with backgrounds of policy as well as nutrition, as well as the community development issues. I think we need to take that step. Without that, we are going to another 20 years talking about the problems of multi-sectoral planning in nutrition. That's the first point I want to make. Second point is we talked about monitoring system. Charlotte talked about that. We have been trying to work with the governments to establish this monitoring system for various objectives, emergency, short-term policy interventions, program interventions, as well as long-term policy making. What is missing in terms of following up Harold saying, what did we learn? We learned that the capacity that can bridge the research to action is missing. Some of researchers, we go around collecting data, extensive data, do wonderful research, publish in Lancet in other papers, but we don't have capacity at the national level to have 200 sample to see what variables work and why, what are the causal factors, what are the indicators, what are the relationships to guide the policy making that can support the broader macro policy research and information that we have. And how are we going to build that bridging capacity?
Thank you very much.
That's the question.
Thank you.
These are not questions, so let's just continue unless somebody wants to comment on them. Do you?
No?
Do you want to comment on the other comments? Yes, secondary, yeah. You do.
I don't want, it's another comment actually. No, I mean, I think this issue of building capacity is really key, and I just want maybe to give some insight on my experience, because we are presently, currently implementing a program trying to build capacity to integrate food security and nutrition. And it's really programs that target people on the ground, people that are doing programs. And I mean, I fully agree that the problem is that people don't speak the same language. I mean, they don't understand each other, and one reason for that is that the concept for food security is different from the conceptual framework for malnutrition. So if you use a concept, then you can't understand each other. So, I mean, what we are doing during 3 days workshop, we are trying to find a common language between those two sectors. And because I think it's the first step, if we want really to work together, we need to speak the same language.
Maybe, the way we do it is building problem trees and solution trees of malnutrition. Because when you get my livelihoods group, because when you ask people why are people vulnerable to malnutrition in this area if they're pastoralists, they build those causal pathways based on their experience. You don't need a definition from the dictionary. They just build it from their experience. And that method has been very powerful. Yep. Next round. Voli, and then, or maybe, sorry, Voli, if you don't mind, I'll give the person who's just before next to the microphone. Yes, thank you. And then we'll need a mic over there, and then lady at the back.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to pose a question. This morning we heard about food safety and how higher nutritional food products were also riskier. And to some extent, this is a continuation of that conversation if we talk about nutrition as an input and an outcome. And so one of the things that has struck me is the facilitating services and infrastructure necessary to get those nutritional outcomes. And that can include your inspection or regulatory services, but it also can include physical infrastructure like cold chains or some kind of failing to have a cold chain. Is there something where you can treat the food and vacuum packet or something, so it has a more extended shelf life. So I guess that's one of the things is, I'd like to pose a question to the panel. Have they thought about how to bridge that gap to, you know, embrace these more nutritious but more perishable foods, to close those nutritional gaps as well, so that some of these things can be, in a sense, turned into a marketplace rather than purely a policy challenge?
Thank you. Wally?
Thank you. And, would like just to make a comment, maybe just a quick question. Comment on Harold's question on how, for instance, we could get better into moving this agenda forward. And on the fact that things should be new and different all the time. Being a practitioner, I'm start getting a bit nervous when I hear this, and those will forgive me for that. I think we are increasingly going for, as a good friend of mine was saying, let's stop thinking about what is new, let's try to do what is right. I think what is new, for instance, and what is right is what we heard, for instance, from the ECHO and DEFCO thing, an attempt, concrete, to try to converge. And I think this tension is spreading all over our donor community, within the UN. I mean, we have very interesting experiences now with UNICEF, WFP, FAO, and by the way, I'm from WFP, sorry, and IFAD and others, to start to layer and converge, because that's all what this is about. And converge on the ground is quite different from converging from this conceptualization and very interesting discourse on definition, but that should actually call for action at the end of the day, because if there's resilience to shock, and shocks have a scale, we need to offer a commensurate response to the scale of the shocks. To really not to recover from those shock in the same abysmal level of vulnerability and food insecurity they were before the shock, but something that really, you know, will propel it upwards. In terms of the how, I mean, the few examples that tend to be cited, you know, today and also in other events are PSMP Ethiopia, now currently Niger, a few things that did together in Somalia, Kenya, Niger, PSMP, Somalia, Kenya. So very few other examples.
Sri Lanka.
Hi, Michelle. And I was about to actually, it's good that I see Michelle now, because one of the concrete things that happened for the PSMP is what preceded the PSMP, where the Prime Minister of this country, plus you know, in agreement with a number of stakeholders, forces the agenda physically as well. I think it was the Austrian embassy volunteered to offer a venue for NGOs, UN, the government practitioners, you know, myself, you know, out from my, you know, beautiful project, etc. Michelle from the World Bank and others, you know, to spend 3 months to develop a new coalition food security program. One RIB out of that created the safety net program. There were other components. But that effort was a concrete step to move forward in time to bring that convergence into something meaningful for millions of people, right? Now, the same process seems to be pushed everywhere. One notion, I mean, one aspect that needs to be brought back here is how we can reach scale. And that's a question, maybe, scale that will, like in Niger, you know, one person said, on doit blinder les communautés. We have to armor those communities from a multi-sectoral, if you want to use that word, or multi-set of entry points. Sometimes sequencing them, sometimes overlaying them directly, sometimes putting some foundations, otherwise, you know, you can't build your house for food and nutrition security, etc., right? So that's one big question, how to scale up. Which include the processes that make this happen. The second question is, when we don't hear this enough, it's how to reduce hardships, and particularly for women and girls, also for the most vulnerable in general. Because it's those 5 hours of walking for fetching water only that preceded the beginning of the PSMP and many other programs in this country that is still there in Niger, that is, you know, one of one of the basic things that need to be cut down. And you cannot just have a nutrition program or a soil conservation program dealing with that. So then the gender and reduction of hardship notion is not entering into this discussion as prominently as some of us at least wish. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing it in. I had seen one last hand just behind you.